Hello and welcome to the start of a brand new series on this channel where I take a song or an artist and I deconstruct the work. I look at the lyrics, songwriting, arrangement, and also the sound design. And I'm going to be sharing as much as I can with you, giving away the presets. And I hope that it can just be a source of inspiration for myself and for anyone else who's watching. I will be taking suggestions for which songs and artists to look at next. So please let me know in the comments section which sort of songs or artists you'd like me to look at next. I'm starting off the series by looking at a song from one of my favorite artists and producers, Jon Bellion. And he's just released his brand new album, which is called GlorySoundPrep. He released it yesterday. One of the singles is called Conversations with My Wife, and that's the song that we're going to be looking at today. I've left loads of timestamps in the description, so if you're just looking for the sound design and the presets, please, skip ahead and find exactly what you want. But for the whole video, we're just going to be having a discussion about the song, the lyrics, the arrangement, and just generally everything in the song, just having a bit of fun. And one of the reasons that I chose this song is that it's quite unique, and there's elements that are familiar, but the arrangement is quite unique, and also the sounds, because there's kind of this dichotomy between this track that sounds on edge all the time and a love song, but the track also does reflect the nature of what he's singing about. He's discussing quite delicate and uneasy topics to talk about, which is, sort of fear of abandonment, and he's worried about whether his wife will still love him if there's no followers, no fame, no money, etc. So that's something that is obviously a huge thing to worry about. And the track really reflects this in the sort of suspension of the sound design, and also just the sheer amount of distortion and grit in the track as well. It's really, really some interesting sound design and some really interesting arrangement. So let's waste no time and jump straight into it. Okay, so I'm inside the project where I've recreated some of the parts, and I've isolated his vocal from the original track. And I'm not going to monetize this video, so if there were adverts, that's from Capitol Records monetizing it and whatnots. I just wanted to say that I've bought all of his music since he started selling music. In the past, he used to give it all away for free. I've bought all his digital downloads, CDs, vinyls, and the Human Condition on vinyl here. So although I shouldn't be playing his vocal along mixed into the track that I've built up, I hope everyone understands that it's just for the sake of this tutorial, and it's a lot better than me or anyone else singing along for that matter. So let's just go through a little bit of the arrangement. The start of the song starts like this for those that are familiar. And the two elements are a sub bass that sounds like this, and this sort of really nice pad. Those are the two main elements there. And then along with his vocal, it sounds a little bit like this.
I dreamt I slept on the side, but you still laid with me.
And he's got some really tasteful use of like a very short reverb and a really cool sort of analog delay sort of effect going on there. This is what I would call the verse or pre-chorus. Everyone's got a little bit of a different idea of what it is because it's a kind of unique song structure. I'm going to dive into how to make these presets in just a moment, so don't worry. But it starts off with quite sort of an edgy sort of suspended chord progression. It kind of makes you feel this tiny little bit of unease, but there's also, it's just such smooth sounds. The sub bass, the pad, it's just this really sort of glorious, warm sound. Then the first really edgy sound kicks in, which is this bass line, which sounds like this.
I dreamt I lost all of my faith.
So we've got this really kind of like aggressive bass just on its own like that. So the track appears to be building, and then everything kind of falls off just before the chorus, which gives that space, and then we kick into the chorus, which sounds like this.
Will you love me when my phone turns off? I don't want to be some digital Jesus.
And then later on, just to finish the chorus, the intensity really picks up and there's these heavy kind of bassy, sort of brassy stabs. So I'll just play these right here for you.
Just me and you inside red light.
Which lands us into the bridge, which is just this absolutely gorgeous bridge with these so many layers of harmonized and stacked vocals. I mean, something that I've noticed in this album is that Jon has really, really pushed the vocals so far this time. He usually, he's always done doubles, triples, harmonized vocals, but this one, he's really taken it so far out with the vocoding, with the choir effects, pitch shifting, just everything. The production is kind of crazy. So this was the bridge, and the second half of the bridge is this gorgeous piano instrumental, which I haven't recreated for this tutorial, but it's just a really beautiful piano instrumental. It sounds really peaceful and lovely. And then we have the pre-chorus, which is much the same as the first time round, but this time it holds. So instead of just the bass line playing through once and cutting, it holds through until almost the whole way to the chorus. Before the chorus, we have this vocoded section, which is really, really cool. This sort of electronic stacked vocal effect. And like I said, Jon's really pushing the vocal processing. Then in the final chorus, we have a few more elements added in. So we have this brassy analog pad, which I'll show you how to make later as well, which kind of joins in with the final chorus. And along with the vocals.
Will you love me when my phone turns off? I don't want to be so digital, Jesus.
Which is just, you know, really, really nice and thick. And then at the end, we have the bass stabs again. And then he has this really emotional riser. It's just, it's him yelling. It's just him yelling, ah. Really emotional release near the end of the song, where you can tell he's repeated the phrase, you know, I just want me and you inside real life. And that's really the point he is trying to drill home in this song, is that he wants to step away from the spotlight, step away from the internet, pretty much, you know, social media, and he wants this love to be real and meaningful. And this yell at the end, there's just so much passion in it, really creative, cooler than just using white noise in this situation. I know it caught a lot of people off guard. And then there is this crazy outro that's like really super majestic, sort of like a final chorus to lead the song out. I've decided not to break that down. There would just be far too much stuff, and I think it's better to just kind of appreciate that and let it inspire you. So now let's jump in and actually sort of dissecting each of these sounds individually. And we're just going to start at the very beginning with this pad and this sub. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the pad, and I'm just going to initialize the Serum preset. So here's the initialized preset, and it starts off sounding really bad like this. So the first thing we're going to do is just grab the default wave shape, and we're going to go to analog BD sign. It's already just going to smooth it out an awful lot. Now from here, we're going to add more voices of unison, and I chose 4 with a unison detune of about 0.10. And the reason was I just felt that this is thick and full enough as it is. You can go higher, but when I went higher, I wasn't even sure if it sounded much better, and it was just taxing the CPU more. So from this point, what I did was increase the attack quite a lot, actually, to about 100 milliseconds. And this changes that thump at the start from like a bit of a click, and it just smooths it all out. The next thing was to use the LFO here. So I selected LFO 1, I put it onto trigger, and what this does is it makes the envelope restart every time you hit a note. So it's a little bit kind of old school effect to it, to be honest. Then you click here with the left click, I dragged it onto the level, and I also dragged it onto the pan. And I'm going to exaggerate this by dragging down here just to show you what this does. It means that this envelope controls the volume. So it's going to be low volume, high, back to low, and then back to the start again. So that's very extreme. So I just made it a smaller sort of area that's acting on. And then just like that, and it just makes it wobble ever so slightly. Not too much, just gives it some movement. I kept the rate on quarter, and you can smooth it out a little bit. It might help stop any clicks, pops, and stuff like that. But the next thing I did was drag the LFO onto the pan as well. And I'm just going to let this play. Gives a really panned, crazy effect. So I just drag that in again. And the combination of those two together, I'm just going to increase that release a little bit, just so we get rid of those pops. Altogether, you just get a really smooth and just really pleasant sound to listen to. And then the next thing was a parametric EQ on the mixer. So everything from about 200 or so is gently rolled away, and I'll just play it with and without. So if I play it without the EQ, there's a lot of that low end, and I just took it away because I know that I'm going to have a sub here taking up these frequencies, so I didn't see the point in having this one be that thick. If this was playing on its own, I'd probably keep it open, but it has the sub there, so I just kept it like this. And then what I do when I'm done with presets is I sort of double click and I name it. So in this case, I just called it like smooth chords or smooth pad, and then you can save it as well. And then I just call it smooth chords again, and then you click OK, and it means the next time I want to use it, I can just go here, go to users, and it will be in here somewhere. Let's take a closer look at the chords. So if you want to copy them, they're just here. This is what I think is sort of the most simple version of the chords. I'm not sure if he maybe used a more complex voicing, but we start with B, D sharp, F sharp, and D at the top. And really this chord progression is really noted by this melody at the top. So the top note of each chord is just the D sharp, then A sharp, G sharp, back to C sharp, and then A sharp, and then back up. But there's this quick little attack like that. So the top of the chords is more like, back to the start again, and the chords sort of just complement this. I'm definitely not a natural keys player, but this sound is really fun to play, so I did experiment playing on the keys. I really do think that little sort of trill like that is very important, and the chords definitely highlight this top line melody an awful lot more than just playing basic chords. And then added on to that, there is this sub bass. Sounds like this. And that really fills out the track in the low end and makes everything feel thick and warm. So again, I've used Serum, and what I'm going to do is I've initialized the patch, and it sounds pretty bad. Really just terrible. So again, we're going to go to analog BD sine. It's just a sine wave, and I'm just going to play it down an octave. I'm also going to just pitch it down an octave here. You can use the sub here. I just find that using this gives you a little bit more control. So we start with that sound, which is really nice, thick and full. Something that I sometimes like to do is to turn bend plus minus on, and then sort of drag it back into the middle, and then see if doing this gives you some nice kind of distortion. Sometimes just, 10 or 15% kind of makes it really sort of kind of crispy and nice. Add a little bit of attack, just so that we don't have a click at the start. I still want a little bit of a thump, but I don't want a click at the start of the sound. Same for the release. Just maybe 50 or 60. Okay, so the next thing to do is probably to go into the effects chain and add some distortion. So if I just start with the tube distortion, drive it, and then sort of pull the mix down a bit, it sort of gives it the ability to be heard. There's this presence in the mix. Then I'm going to add an EQ, and I'm going to tame that a little bit by just taking the gain down in the high end. The next thing that I did is ran it into this virtual mix rack, and this kind of changes the sound quite a lot. So what we have is more saturation. Then we have a compressor, and what the compressor does is just make sure everything's at the same level, but it also just lets a little bit through at the start. It lets that thump come through, because the attack is kind of like a medium fast attack. So it just lets that thump come through and then clamps down on the bass, so that it's just this solid, thick, subby sine wave that just warms up the whole track. But it lets that kind of attack through. And then I have a few EQs and filters just to try and shape the sound and make it fit into the mix, but that's not like a fundamental part of the sound. So now that we've looked at the sub and the pad, I'm going to try and look at this bass line here. No, I don't actually have a good bass VST, so if you have like Trillion, or maybe there's some stuff inside Omnisphere, just something that sounds like a really cool bass, just use that. What makes this special is that there's just a huge amount of distortion, and I think potentially a really subtle sort of like slappy reverb on it. So the idea was to just give this bass a whole lot of attitude. Now I have a feeling that Mark Williams, the co-producer or co-writer of this song, he's an absolute phenomenal guitarist and bass player and just musician in general. I have a feeling he played this live on a bass, so it's going to be really difficult to recreate it with a VST. And there was a lot of aggression in there, there was a lot of dynamics, and then I think they've just processed it with a huge amount of distortion. So I've tried to take the bass from sounding like this, which is kind of, it's a bit distorted already, it's definitely not clean. And what I've actually done is remove bass from it, because there's that sub still, and then it's just gone through a huge amount of distortion. So virtual mix rack, I've got a huge amount of compression going on it, lots of saturation here, the saturation knob again, just to give it a taste. If I turn this up, it's that kind of feel. And in the chorus, I've actually automated the distortion up, because at the end of the chorus, it's just this wall of distorted noise, but it's so cool. And I found that with that bass line, it was really difficult to balance it in the mix, because it's so different when the vocals are stacked on top. When there's no vocals, you want to make that bass line jump out and be really wide. But in Jon's track, the way they've mixed it, or the way Manny Marroquin's mixed it, is that the bass is quite sort of like flat. It doesn't really jump out at you. And initially I was thinking, oh, that's maybe not so exciting, but it just fits in the track so well. And then in the chorus, it's the same kind of bass, maybe a little bit more distortion, and it's just playing really, really quickly like this. but I couldn't get the dynamics in. I couldn't make it go loud then soft because the VST wasn't responding to it. So you really want it to jump up and down, just as though you were actually playing a bass. Every second note or every third note might be a little bit more quiet. It really adds a lot of swing and groove to it. At times you can see this distortion envelope increase. So, it might go from all the way to really gets really distorted at the end once these stabs kick in here. And I should explain what these stabs are then. So on their own, with no risers, it's just this. And what I've decided to use for this is a plugin called Substance on a preset that I've made. So what I have is this, actually I'll play each three layers on their own. So there's 3 layers. One sounds like this. So just like a really solid bass. The next one sounds like this. So like a swelly brass sort of patch. And then this one, which is a saw wave. And together they sound like this. So it's just really, underneath the track, a lot of aggression there. And then all I've done is use the parametric EQ to remove the bass, because although it sounds huge, the bass was actually being provided by that sub bass. So if I just play it without that EQ, and with the EQ, it's just not blowing out the speakers. And when I play it with the sub as well, you'll notice that it really needs that EQ. So if I take the EQ off and it plays with the sub, it's just a big mess. Whereas now I play it, it's really contained and it just sits where it's supposed to sit. And then what I've done is print this MIDI out into audio. There's many ways to do this. What you can do is find the pattern, and then you can right click and sort of just print it out, a quick render as audio clip. So if I just do that, now that that's printed, all I have to do is get that bass stab there, which just looks like this. So it looks like I've printed a lot more than I needed to. So I've just made that unique as a sample, just like that. If I press edit, and I'm just gonna go into the Edison now. So I'm just gonna select everything and reverse it by pressing Alt and pressing the left arrow key. Now what I have is this. And what I'm gonna do is take that final note and I'm just gonna drag it straight onto the playlist. This is what I've done just here. And then I normalize it just so that it's nice and large. And then I reverse that into itself so that we get this effect. And he also has like a really cool sort of guitar, it sort of like chugs a bit like this. It's not played with the bass, but I just did it in there with the bass just to add a little bit of that aggression. And the final result sounds a little bit like this. Then into the bridge, it's the same as the start with the sub and the pad, but the real shining thing here is those vocals, which are just, it's like a huge choir, and I'm pretty sure it's all just his voice. So he's recorded multiple layers, he's used doublers, triplers, whatever he's used. There's an awful lot of compression and EQ blending those vocals together, but I really don't know quite how he created such a lush choir sound. So if anyone has any ideas on that, maybe what plugins were used or what, recording techniques were used, please leave them in the comments down below, because I would love to know how to do that the same way. Now if I sort of skip ahead to the final chorus, it's really just that analog, I call it an analog brassy pad. I don't actually think this transitional note is actually in there. I just added it in because I enjoyed putting it in there. But the final result in the chorus sounds like this.
Love me when my phone turns off. I don't want to be so digital.
And let's just take a look at how we create this pad. It's just a really nice sound to play on. This isn't 100% accurate to the one in the track. The one in the track sounds a bit nicer, I think. I'll just break it down into different oscillators. So I started with oscillator A, and the first thing I did was this envelope here. So I have this envelope with a slow attack, so there's no stabby jump at the start, 50 milliseconds or so. Then the decay is really long, because I noticed in the track that it had decayed away by the time the next chord came in. It wasn't up like this. It was nice and decayed away like this. The next thing was going into envelope 2, and I've linked this to the filter. So you click and drag here and drop it on the cutoff. And what this does is means it controls the filter cutoff from this envelope. So it jumps up, then filters down. And it slowly sort of just filters down, just gently like that. See how it's always open there? Whereas this one filters in a little bit. It's just really nice and tasteful. I have the filter set up for A and B. If I go back to oscillator A, it's the basic saw wave, 7 voices of unison, and a detune of about 0.07. Just do whatever feels right until it blends in with your track. Really, this is something you do kind of to mix it in. And then after that, I went to oscillator B to add this kind of other sort of texture to the sound. Kind of really high-end, quite sort of, it'd be fatiguing if it was all on its own, but, and what I did is I went into the analog, I went into basic shapes, and then the wavetable position is position 5. So it's this kind of cubey, squarey sort of sound, 3 voices of unison, but the 3 voices of unison are all sort of on top of each other. So they're not very wide, they're all sort of really close in. This gives this kind of warped kind of sound to it. And then I have the level sort of lower than the other one, so it just blends in there. It just gives this high-end sort of shimmer to it. In the effects chain, I have a little bit of EQ just to control the low end. And this was more so that when I was playing down here, just so that it didn't get in the way of the sub and everything else that was playing. But it's kind of like a really nice sort of pretty sound that sort of just accents everything else that's going on there. When it came to the mixer, what was going on, I'll just take these all off. So what I had was a little bit of reverb, just kind of smooths the sound out. Then I had a parametric EQ, again, just to do more low end. You can get more control with an EQ like this than you can with the one built into Serum. And this kind of brightens up the top a bit. I'm trying to pull out these frequencies a little bit without making it too extreme, so just a little bit of a boost. And then I also had the imager, which I was trying to make it sound a little bit wider with. So if I play it and then bypass it, in headphones, there's definitely a really big difference. That probably won't come through at all on a laptop or a phone, but it's just a little bit of imaging, and that was to just try and make it fit in the mix. I wanted it to be a bit wider because there was a lot of other stuff happening in the center of the mix. So that's pretty much it for that sound as well. I also noticed that this pad sort of dies away towards the end. When all these bass stabs come in, the distortion and his final yell, those pads kind of dip away. It means that when the chorus finally kicks in, you've actually removed a lot of that high-end energy. So when the chorus hits in, it's just really, really majestic. And what I would say about the final chorus as well, because this sort of concludes what we've talked about, is that the chorus, again, is this weird, I've said it a lot, dichotomy, this contrast where there's the same gritty, edgy things that we're familiar with in the song by this point, because we've heard them over and over. But there is this absolutely majestic, glorious lead. That's really the only word for it. And the smoothness and clarity in that, for me, that represents his eventual conclusion or clarity of mind on the topic that everything is okay. That's what I think. I think it switches up at the end where he's no longer feeling so on edge, so worried, so paranoid potentially about his wife. And I feel that he is in a better place about it all. I might be just, grasping at straws here, but I feel that conclusion, and with all the drums that kick in and the screaming and the lead, I just feel that concludes the song and says everything is all right. And then at the end, there's this tiny little fall off where he does say he's ready to run from the spotlight, and that's all right, pretty much. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it was fun, potentially inspiring. All the presets are in the description. You can download them, get using them. I hope no one minds that I've used bits of his vocal, isolated them a little bit. It really helps give the song a little bit of context, I think, as opposed to just hearing the instruments. And again, if anyone's got this far in the video, please do comment down below which sort of artists or songs you'd like to see me do next. They could be current, they could be really old songs, popular artists, or completely indie artists that maybe I've never even heard of before. Thank you again for watching. Hope you have a great day, a great week, and I hope to see you in the next video too. Bye for now.